The sound of the suitcase zipper was like music to my ears. There had always been something therapeutic about packing, sorting clothes, folding towels, choosing the right shoes. Every detail felt like a thread I was stitching with hope. After all, that weekend would be a family reunion, the first one in a long time. On the bed, I spread out small floral-wrapped packages, little gifts for the grandkids, toy cars, dolls, picture books. I even bought a new blue linen apron to cook with them without making too much of a mess, I thought, smiling to myself. In the kitchen, my old recipe notebook lay open. On the page, my handwriting, round and old-fashioned, listed the full menu: beef stroganoff, potato salad, lemon pie. Nothing fancy, but full of memories. I opened the travel agency's email for the third time. Everything was confirmed. A country house for 12 people, 3 days, with a pool, a garden, and a fireplace. I paid for it all with my retirement card. A big expense, yes, but it's worth it for family, I kept telling myself. It's going to be wonderful, I murmured. I was talking to myself, but in my mind there was an invisible audience. My children laughing, my grandchildren running around, Daniel hugging me and saying, "Thanks, Mom." I grabbed my phone and sent a message. "Son, everything's set for Friday. I can take the kids with me in the car if you want." The little blue checkmark appeared. No reply. I laughed it off, trying to ignore the sting. He's probably busy, I thought. In the living room, my eyes fell on a framed photo, an old one, Daniel as a little boy, sitting on my lap, and Richard's. Ah, Richard. He was smiling, that calm smile that always brought balance to the house. Since he's been gone, I've tried to keep everyone together. It feels like the bond he left behind now depends entirely on me. "You'd be so happy about this reunion," I whispered, touching the glass of the frame. That night, while wrapping the little gifts, I felt a faint twinge, something between anxiety and fear, but I brushed it off with a smile. Family is still family, even when it feels distant. The next morning, the sunlight slipped shyly through the window. I tied on my new apron and started baking cookies. As the dough turned golden, the smell filled the whole house. Smells like childhood, I thought. Deep down, I still believed that love could be rekindled through simple gestures, and that weekend would be my chance to bring it all back to life. I want you to know that I'm relieved to finally share my story. Thank you to the channel Buried by Family for listening to me. Please like this video before we continue. It really helps. Now, listen to my story. The phone rang late in the afternoon. It was Daniel. "Mom, everything set for the weekend?" he asked, his voice half distracted, like he was talking while typing something. "All set, honey," I replied cheerfully. "I've already bought everything. Packed the little gifts. Oh, you didn't have to worry about that. Samantha's taking care of everything." I smiled, trying to keep my enthusiasm. "That's great. Then maybe I can help with breakfast. The kids love my pancakes." "We'll see, Mom. We're still figuring out the schedule." Before I could say anything else, I heard a woman's voice in the background. "Tell her she'll be in the downstairs room." "Okay." He repeated it automatically. "Oh, Sam says you'll stay in the downstairs room. It's quieter, more private." I hesitated for a moment. "All right," I said softly. Silence. Then he added, "Oh, Mom, and if you could bring an extra set of sheets. Looks like the house doesn't have many." "Of course," I said, forcing my voice to stay light. But inside me, something creaked, like an old door opening after years of being shut. That night, I opened the family group chat. The screen was full of messages. "Who's bringing the wine?" "Samantha," confirmed the menu. "Don't forget the cooler." I sent a little heart emoji. No one replied. Hours passed. Then came the notification. "You've been removed from the group Real Family." I blinked, confused. I thought it was a mistake. But soon I realized they had created a new group, Weekend at the Country House, and I wasn't in it. I took a deep breath, went to the closet, took my apron, and hung it on a hook. Maybe they just don't want me to get too tired, I thought, but a quiet voice inside whispered, or maybe they just don't want you there. Still, I kept my plans, because giving up has never been part of what I learned about love. On Thursday, I went to the market to pick up the last few items. I chose fruit, cheese, bottles of juice. The cashier, who already knew me, smiled. "Big party coming up, Mrs. Martha." I smiled back. "Family reunion," I said, with a sparkle that was half truth, half stubbornness. At the checkout, while setting the groceries on the belt, I remembered when Daniel was little. He always wanted to push the cart, knocking over cookies, laughing so loud it filled the whole aisle. Now, he was a serious man, distant, and sometimes he spoke to me as if I were one of his employees. Back home, I started unpacking the groceries. While folding the bags, I noticed something odd. The address of the country house hadn't been shared with me, only the name of the town. I grabbed my phone and sent a message. Daniel, could you send me the address of the house? I couldn't find it in the email. No reply. A few minutes later, Samantha answered in the old group. Better if you rest, Mrs. Martha. The drive's long. We'll pick you up if we have time. If we have time. 3 small words, but sharp as knives. I set the phone aside and went out to the yard. The hydrangeas were starting to bloom. I ran my fingers gently over the petals, thinking of Richard. He used to say, flowers don't ask to be seen. They just bloom. And whoever wants to notice, will. I looked up at the sky and thought, maybe it's time I learned to bloom in silence too. On the night before the trip, I made a simple dinner: rice, roast beef, and mashed potatoes. I imagined Daniel and Samantha might stop by before heading out. But night fell, and no one came. The phone rang at 10 o'clock. Hey Mom, just calling to let you know, we're leaving earlier tomorrow. Okay. Oh, I thought you were coming for dinner. I cooked for everyone. Yeah, we're just gonna hit the road straight away, trying to avoid traffic. There was a pause, and then came the words that broke something inside me. Mom, this weekend at the country house is just for real family. For a second I thought I'd misheard, but Daniel went on, you understand, right? It's just something more private, just our people. Sam wants some time with her side of the family. Silence. Of course, honey. I understand, I said, my voice barely catching air. The call ended. I stood there, staring at the phone while the clock ticked slow, heavy seconds. On the table, the plates were set, 3 places, candles lit, everything waiting for a family that no longer existed. I sat down, took a deep breath, and ate alone. Each bite weighed like a stone, but there was something new in my eyes, a calm, almost cold glimmer. As if, deep down, I knew that dinner wasn't the end, but the beginning of something different. When I finished, I blew out the candles and whispered to myself, it's all right, whoever pays, decides. The next morning, the email from the travel agency would arrive, and with it, the twist that would change everything. I couldn't sleep. My son's words echoed in my head like a drop falling endlessly on stone. Just for real family. In the dark living room, the shadows seemed to listen along with me. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. The chamomile tea on the table had gone cold. I tried to find excuses. Maybe Daniel hadn't meant it the way it sounded. Maybe Samantha was under stress. But none of those explanations held up against the memory of his tone. Neutral. Final. The kind of tone that comes from a decision made long ago. I walked to my room, opened the closet, and saw the suitcases ready. Everything in them carried a kind of tenderness. Neatly folded clothes, gifts for the grandchildren, a new pair of pajamas. They looked like relics of a childish dream. I picked up one of the little packages. Inside was a small, illustrated book, The Day Grandma Saved the Forest. I smiled faintly. It was one of the few stories where the grandmother was the hero. But now, even that role, Grandma felt like it had been taken from me. I sat on the bed and cried. Not the desperate kind of crying that seeks comfort, but the silent kind, the one that comes when you finally understand something is lost for good. With each tear, my body felt lighter, as if I were washing away the last traces of illusion. When the sun began to rise, I was still awake. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and watched the light spread across the garden. Amid the hydrangeas, a butterfly landed. Freedom can be sad, too, I thought. The phone buzzed on the table. A new email, reservation confirmation, Bala Vista Ranch. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but I opened it, and what I saw made me freeze. Guest list confirmed. 12 names, among them, Daniel, Samantha, her parents, 2 couples of friends, and the grandkids. The only name missing was mine. I read it again, thinking it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't. The reservation was under my name, the payment charged to my card, and yet, the system showed every room taken, every single one, except mine. I stood still, feeling the air leave my lungs slowly. Then a short laugh escaped, part disbelief, part pain. So that's it. The house was mine, but the place never was. I opened my wallet. The receipt from the travel agency was there, with my card number printed clear as day. My heartbeat grew stronger, not from anger, but from clarity. That kind of sharp lucidity that only comes once pain has finished breaking every illusion. I picked up the phone and dialed the agency. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? I'd like to confirm a cancellation." "Cancellation? But this is a large booking. 12 guests. Yes, the reservation is mine. The card is mine. And I want to cancel." On the other end, silence. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "I've never been more sure." As I listened to the sound of keys tapping on the other end, I felt something inside me realign, like a spine straightening after years of bending. The power of choice was finally back in my hands. At 9 in the morning, the phone started ringing. It was Daniel, 3 times, then Samantha, then her mother. I let it ring. The sound of the calls blended with the soft hiss of the kettle on the stove. Across town, I knew the family cars were probably lining up at the ranch gate. The receptionist, confused, was likely explaining that the reservation had been canceled the night before by the cardholder, and that without payment, the system simply wouldn't allow check-in. The messages began to pop up one after another. "Mom, what did you do?" From Daniel. "Are you out of your mind? That house was for everyone." From Samantha. "We're here with the kids, under the sun." Again from Daniel. I looked at the screen, typed, deleted, closed the app instead of replying. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, set the table carefully, butter, bread, fruit jam, a white cup, turned on some soft instrumental music on the radio, and for the first time in a long while, I savored silence as if it were a feast. The phone kept buzzing, but I left it on the shelf, like someone turning the world off. After years of being the first to rush in and fix everything, I finally chose to do nothing, and that nothing felt like freedom. Sunday dawned quiet. The sky was a soft, washed-out blue, clear and still. No sound of the phone. It was as if the universe had muted the drama and left only air. I stepped into the backyard with a mug of coffee. The scent of damp earth mingled with the smell of bread baking in the oven. I thought of Richard. "What would you do if you were here?" I asked silently. And somehow, I could almost hear his old answer. "Whoever doesn't want you at the table doesn't deserve the taste of your cooking." I smiled, a small smile, but whole. I went back inside, opened the window, and let the wind move the curtains. Outside, the world carried on. Inside me, something was beginning again. Later, I sat at my desk and wrote in a notebook. It wasn't me who lost a family. It was them who lost a home. I tucked the notebook into a drawer beside the receipt for the reservation, and I never spoke of it to anyone again. But that night, as I looked up at the sky, I thought, one day, maybe I'll return to that house, not with them, but with those who understand that home is where there's room for your soul. I didn't know it then, but that thought was the seed of a new chapter in my life. On Monday morning, the sound of notifications started again. The old family group was on fire. "You ruined the kids' weekend," wrote Samantha. "I was humiliated in front of my in-laws," said Daniel. "I never imagined you could be so cruel," wrote his mother-in-law. I read everything in silence. With each message, my chest tightened, not with guilt, but with exhaustion. I took a deep breath and asked myself, how many years of my life have I spent trying to be forgiven just for existing? I deleted the group, turned off notifications, and for the first time in decades, the house was completely silent. The landline rang. It was Clara, my lifelong friend. "Martha, what happened? People are saying you canceled the family trip." "I did. But why, dear?" "Because I paid for it, and because they took my name off the list." On the other end, silence. Then Clara let out a dry little laugh. "So, for the first time, you finally put your name where it belonged." I laughed, too, but felt my eyes fill with tears. It felt strange. "Clara," I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just clicked cancel. "Sometimes," she said, "a click is louder than a scandal." We sat in silence for a few seconds, hearing only the faint ticking of the clock. And in that small pocket of peace, I realized, without knowing how to explain it, that I had finally found myself again. In the days that followed, silence turned into rumor. Relatives, neighbors, and acquaintances began to talk. In the church group, someone wrote, "They say Martha's become bitter since her husband died." At the market, the cashiers whispered, "She's the one who canceled her own family's trip." And when I crossed paths with the mailman, he smiled awkwardly, unsure whether to offer condolences or congratulations. I noticed it all. but I didn't defend myself. Because, for the first time, I knew I didn't owe anyone an explanation. One morning, Daniel showed up at my door. His eyes were tired, his shirt wrinkled. "Mom, can we talk?" I hesitated, then opened the door. He stepped inside, standing there, uncomfortable. I don't even know what to say," the kids cried. "Sam's devastated. I can imagine. You could have called me, and you could have invited me." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Daniel took a deep breath. "You're hurt." "No, son, I'm just awake." He tried to go on, but my calmness threw him off balance. "We could redo the trip," he said at last. "No need. That trip was never mine." Daniel looked down. There was no anger between us, only a mirror. And in that mirror, he saw what he'd refused to see. The mother who had always waited for him was, finally, walking away, without moving at all. That night I made a cup of mint tea and sat out on the porch. The sky was clear, and the wind moved through the leaves like an old familiar song. My phone lay on the table turned off. It felt strange and freeing, not to be a hostage to notifications. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today I realized that silence is the answer they never expected." When I finished my tea, I lit a candle. The flame flickered gently, its reflection trembling in the windows. And I thought, maybe love has its stages too. First comes giving, then waiting, and finally, letting go. I let the candle burn all the way down. And when the wick went out, I felt as if something inside me had been cleansed too. The next morning, Clara showed up with a cornmeal cake. "I brought coffee and curiosity," she said. I laughed, curious about the farmhouse scandal. "About the peace you're radiating," she replied, sitting down and looking around. "Something's different here. It's the silence," I said, smiling. I took the shouting out of the decor. We both laughed, but the laughter was different now, mature, calm, and full of quiet understanding. That night, I sat at the table and took a fresh sheet of paper. I began writing a letter to Daniel. Not to send, just to empty my heart. "My son, you think what I did was revenge, but it wasn't. It was the opposite. It was self-respect. I spent years trying to earn a seat at a table I had set myself. And one day, I realized the mistake wasn't being left out. It was continuing to wait to be invited." I paused, took a deep breath, and went on. "I didn't want you to feel ashamed. I wanted you to learn to feel shame for what really matters, for the silence you allowed to grow between us." I signed it. "With love, Mom." I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer beside the canceled reservation receipt, a quiet symbol of what was now behind me. Then I turned off the light, looked up at the ceiling, and smiled. Funny, I thought, the world hasn't changed at all. I just stopped begging for a place in it. I fell asleep in peace, and the next morning, something unexpected would happen. A new email from the travel agency, and with it, a chance to rewrite my story. The week passed like a soft, hazy dream. Quiet, even days, coffee, crochet, the sound of birds outside the window. Then, one Thursday morning, the computer chimed. Subject line, "Special offer, return to Bella Vista Ranch." I laughed out loud. Fate, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of humor. I opened the email, and there it was, the same house, the same dates available for the following month. For a moment, I hesitated. The memories still hurt, like a fresh scar. But then something inside me whispered, "You can rewrite the story. Not with them, with the ones who truly see you." I picked up the phone and called the agency. "Good morning. This is Martha Sanders." "Oh yes, ma'am. You're the one who canceled the previous reservation. Remember?" "I remember. And I'd like to book it again." "Perfect. For how many guests?" "4. The agent typed quickly, names of the guests. I thought for a moment, and smiled. "Write down, Martha Sanders, Clara Gomez, Lydia Benson, and Irma Collins, all confirmed. Yes, all real family." When I hung up, I laughed to myself, not out of mockery, but out of relief. The world kept spinning. But this time, I was the one holding the map. That afternoon, I walked over to Clara's gate. Busily I asked, wearing that conspiratorial look she knew so well. "Never too busy for gossip," she said, opening the gate. "What's going on?" "It's not gossip. It's an invitation." She raised an eyebrow. "Now that's new." I explained between laughter and pauses, the house, the email, the idea of going back to the ranch, but this time, in a different way. When I finished, Clara stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she murmured, "You're going back there." "I am, but not alone. We called the two neighbors from the next street over, Lydia, recently widowed after years with an arrogant doctor, and Mrs. Irma, a cheerful woman with tired legs and an easy laugh. In my backyard, the four of us sat on iron chairs, glasses of orange juice in hand, a youthful energy buzzing between us. "So that's it. A trip just for us?" Lydia asked, half skeptical. "That's right. No sons, no daughters, no known laughters, no excuses, and no diets, I hope," Irma teased. We all laughed, and that light sound filled the yard. I watched them for a moment. It was the first time in ages that someone laughed with me, not at me. "When do we leave?" Clara asked. "In 3 weeks. I want to do this right." We raised our glasses in an impromptu toast, and for the first time in a very long while, I felt like I was part of something alive. The weeks leading up to the trip were a celebration of details. There was no luxury, only excitement. I handled everything with the same care as before, but the meaning had changed. Love was no longer an attempt to be accepted. It had become a gesture of celebration. On the dining table, I spread out bright-colored lists: food to bring, easy hiking trails, wine in glasses, scarves for photos. Irma, all excited, showed up with a portable record player. Lydia promised to make the desserts, and Clara took charge of the playlist: boleros, Italian songs, and old romantic movie themes. "If I die on this trip, I'll die happy," Irma declared, dramatic as ever. "You're not dying, woman, you're being resurrected," I said, laughing. Deep down, we all knew this trip was more than just a getaway. It was a rite of renewal. Each of us carried a heavy past in our suitcase, and the hope of leaving it somewhere between the ranch gate and the sunset. The night before we left, I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hair neatly done, lipstick subtle, eyes steady. I was no longer the woman who waited for invitations. I was the woman who created them. Saturday dawned golden. Clara's car pulled up in front of my house, the trunk full of luggage and laughter spilling out through the windows. I closed the door behind me and took one last look at the house. There was no sadness, only gratitude. "Ready?" Clara asked, sunglasses on, and a mischievous grin on her face. "I was born ready, I just didn't know it," I replied. We hit the road. The landscape unfolded in shades of green and blue, and every curve seemed to erase an old memory. On the radio, "What a Wonderful World" was playing. Irma sang off key. Lydia laughed and joined in. Clara tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. And I, watching through the window, felt the wind on my face, realizing that wind smelled like rebirth. We stopped at a roadside cafe, ate pastries, took pictures, laughed until we cried. A group of young people watched us with amusement. One of them joked, "Look at the road trip aunties over there." I smiled and answered, "We're not aunties, we're survivors." Everyone laughed, but I meant every word. Because in that car, there were no more victims, only women who had decided to own their stories. When the sign "Bella Vista Ranch, 3 kilometers" appeared, an emotional silence filled the car. I watched the wooden gate draw near and whispered, "The first time, I came here to be accepted, and now," Clara asked, "now, I've come to belong." And the gate opened. The gate creaked as Clara pushed it open with the car. The sound echoed through the tall trees like an old greeting. The dirt road climbed gently, lined with eucalyptus and wild hydrangeas. When the house appeared white, with blue shutters and a wide porch, my chest tightened. It was the same house, the same garden. But my eyes were different. The wind carried the scent of firewood, and my heart answered as if greeting an old friend. Irma was the first to step out of the car. "My God, what a beautiful place!" she exclaimed, her voice full of childlike wonder. Lydia looked around and sighed. "It looks like something out of a movie." Clara, ever the practical one, grabbed the suitcases and smiled. And for the first time, the movie's ours. I stood still for a moment on the porch. The wooden floor creaked under my feet, and the sound seemed to whisper, "Now." Yes, I placed my hand on the doorframe, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The interior was exactly as I remembered: the stone fireplace, the floral curtains, the faint scent of pine. But this time, the silence was sweet, not empty. In the middle of the room stood a large table. I ran my hand across its surface and thought, the first time, I dreamed of sitting at this table with them. Now, it's mine. The four of us split up the rooms, each choosing one with almost childlike excitement. Irma took the one with the porch, "So I can wake up to the birds," she said. Lydia chose the room with the old bathtub, laughing. I'm going to take a bubble bath and pretend I'm a rich woman from the 70s. Clara picked the room with the blue window, and I stayed on the ground floor, the same room that had once been suggested for me because it was more private. When I walked in, I looked at the white walls and smiled. Now, that room was my space, not my punishment. That night, we cooked together. Dinner was simple: pasta with tomato sauce, grated cheese, and cheap wine. But the taste was a feast. Lydia, you put in too much salt, Clara teased. Of course, to give life some flavor, Lydia replied, laughing. Irma turned on the record player and put on an old song, Besea Mucho. Within minutes, the living room became a dance floor. The four of us, in our socks, spun between the chairs, laughing until tears filled our eyes. I stopped for a moment to watch them. I wasn't crying from loneliness anymore. I was crying from gratitude. That house, which had once been a symbol of rejection, was now the stage for our new beginning. You know what this is, ladies? I asked, raising my glass. What? They chimed in together. Real family. Our laughter echoed late into the night, mingling with the sound of the wind and the crackling fire. On Sunday, the mountain chill arrived early. We lit the fireplace, made hot chocolate, and sat in a circle wrapped in colorful blankets. The firelight danced across our faces, as if unlocking old safes within each of us. Irma spoke first. My husband never let me drive, she said. He used to say a woman behind the wheel was a moving hazard. We all burst out laughing. Well, then you're driving us back home, Clara said. God forbid. I'm terrified of driving. Then drive scared, I replied gently, but with conviction. Then it was Lydia's turn. She told us her son hadn't visited in months, that at Christmas, he'd only sent a cold message. Happy holidays, Mom. Clara reached for her hand. They don't know what they have, she said softly. We're like wine. How so? Irma asked. We get better with time. We just need someone who knows how to appreciate it. We all laughed, but the laughter came with tears. The kind that cleanse. I spoke last. I just wanted to be remembered, I said quietly, without drama. I spent my life trying to be useful so I wouldn't be forgotten. But now I understand. Whoever needs to be useful to deserve love was never truly loved. The fire cracked, as if applauding. No one spoke. Only silence. That good kind of silence, full of presence. The next morning, we decided to walk to the lake, just a few minutes from the house. The path was lined with tall trees and carried that sweet smell of damp earth. The cool air tickled our skin. When we arrived, the still water mirrored the sky, and in it, we saw the four of us, smiling. Take a picture, Irma shouted. Clara adjusted her phone, and the click captured more than faces. It captured the moment itself. Lightness, companionship, freedom. We stayed there for hours, talking about life, mistakes, and second chances. I picked up a small stone and tossed it into the lake. This is for everything I never became, I said. The water rippled outward in perfect circles, and I added, and for everything I still can become. Lydia closed her eyes. You know what hurts the most, she said softly. What? Clara asked. That no one ever teaches us that solitude can be beautiful too. I looked toward the horizon and replied, loneliness is only sad when it's imposed. When it's chosen, it's freedom. We sat in silence, watching the sun's reflection dance across the water. And in that moment, we all understood the end of a story can, in truth, be the beginning of another. Monday dawned lazy, sunlight filtering softly through the curtains. I woke before the others, barefoot, and went to the kitchen. The smell of coffee began to fill the house. On the radio, a soft Ella Fitzgerald song played in the background. As I stirred sugar into my cup, I realized how simple and perfect that moment was. There was no sound of arguments, no pressure to make everything look nice for anyone. Just the quiet hum of life unfolding in peace. Irma appeared, half asleep. It's early, woman. I woke up to the smell of coffee, I said, smiling. Coffee and life don't wait for anyone. One by one, they appeared. Lydia brushing her hair, Clara tying her scarf. The table filled up. Bread, fruit, cheese, laughter. It looked beautiful, abundant, a celebration without reason. I don't think I've ever eaten this well, Lydia said. It's the flavor of freedom, I replied. Tastes like a new beginning. We laughed, and in that ordinary morning, without plans or expectations, each of us felt that it was possible to grow old without growing bitter. Later, we walked through the garden. I picked a few flowers and placed them in a glass jar. On a slip of paper, I wrote, Guests' flowers. I left the note on the table. Maybe no one else would ever see it, but I knew that small gesture carried a promise to never again ask to be welcomed. The last day came quietly. The sun lingered lazily on its way down, painting the sky in shades of orange and lilac. The bags were packed, but no one was in a hurry to leave. Clara sat on the porch with a glass of wine. Funny, she said. It feels like we've been here a month. Maybe because we finally lived what we'd been postponing, I replied. Irma took out her phone and started snapping pictures of the landscape. Lydia, her eyes glistening, said softly, I never thought a trip could heal so many things I didn't even know were hurting. I smiled. We don't really heal the past. We just learn not to let it choose our next steps. A gentle silence settled over us, the kind that carries meaning. Later, we tidied up the kitchen, closed the windows, and put out the fire in the hearth. Before leaving, I walked back to the center of the living room. I looked around with tenderness. The first time I came here, I just wanted to fit in, I said. And now, Clara asked. Now, I belong. I locked the door, turning the key slowly, like someone closing a story, but not their heart. The road home felt different. The same route, but the weight had shifted. What once hurt now set me free. Irma slept in the back seat, snoring softly. Lydia stared out at the passing fields in quiet reflection. Clara drove, humming a tune. And I, in the passenger seat, let the wind tangle my hair. At one point, we passed a sign that read, Families are built here. I chuckled softly. They are, I said. Sometimes from what's left, sometimes from nothing, but they are. When we reached the city, we stopped for one last coffee before parting ways. We have to do this again, Clara said. Not again. I corrected her gently. We have to continue. What do you mean? This wasn't an escape, I said. It was a beginning. We looked at each other and understood, that kind of understanding that doesn't need more words. When I got home, I opened the windows and took a deep breath. The air felt new. The house, once too quiet, now sounded alive. On the table, I placed the printed photo of the four of us. Below it, I wrote, Country House First Gathering, and beside it, I left a small note, Family isn't blood. It's whoever lights the fire with you. A few days later, Clara showed up at my gate with an envelope in her hands. I brought an idea, she said. Let's hear it. Let's turn that trip into a project. I frowned. A project. Yes, the Country House Club. A club, one weekend a month, for women like us, women who've been left behind, forgotten, or just tired of waiting. I stayed quiet. The idea felt bold, but it also sounded a lot like destiny. And who's going to organize all that? I asked. You, of course. I laughed, surprised. Me, the house was your idea. The courage was yours too. All that's missing is your name on the plan. I looked toward the garden, thoughtful. The wind was moving through the hydrangeas, sunlight spilling gently between the leaves. The Country House Club, I repeated softly. Well, she pressed, smiling. Well then, it's decided. Let it be the start of something that heals others too. We hugged, and in that embrace was everything I'd spent a lifetime searching for, belonging. 2 weeks later, my living room looked completely different. Handmade posters hung on the walls with phrases like every woman deserves a weekend of peace. On the table sat a coffee pot, simple cakes, and fresh flowers. Clara, Lydia, and Irma arrived early to help set everything up, and, one by one, other women began to appear. Neighbors, women from church, a young clerk from the pharmacy. Each brought something, a dish, a shy smile, a story long kept inside. I watched the scene with tears in my eyes. Look at this, Clara said. And to think it all started with a cancelled email. Sometimes, I replied. It's in the cancellations that life confirms what really matters. The gathering was light, full of laughter and release. One woman, Senya, shared that her husband had left and her children hadn't visited in months. Another, Helena, confessed that she lived in silence, always caring for everyone, while no one really listened to her. When my turn came, I said only this: I was forgotten once too. But I learned that when the world closes a door, you can always build a porch. The room erupted in applause, and in that moment, the Country House Club was born, not as a travel group, but as an emotional refuge for women who still want to bloom. The following week, Daniel showed up, without calling first. He parked the car in front of my house. I was watering the plants. When I saw him, I took a deep breath. Can I come in? He asked, his voice almost childlike. You can. The living room was full of photos, from trips, from new friends, from flowers. Everything in it overflowed with life. I saw the pictures of that club, he said. It's not a club, I corrected him with a smile. It's a new beginning. He hesitated. Mom, I don't know what got into me that day. I said awful things. I know what got into you, I replied calmly. You believed I'd always be here, ready to forgive. Daniel lowered his head. I was an idiot. You were. But the worst part is, so was I. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I was an idiot for thinking I needed to be accepted, to deserve love. Silence settled between us. This time, there was no anger, only understanding. He exhaled deeply. Can I fix it? Not everything. But you can start by coming over for coffee with the women from the club sometime. Daniel laughed awkwardly. I don't know if I'd fit in. That's right, I said, smiling gently. Now you're the one who needs an invitation. The words hung in the air steady, but without bitterness, and he understood the message. Love still existed, but the pedestal was gone. In the days that followed, I returned to my routine, but something inside me had settled, solid, steady. The old wounds no longer hurt, they simply taught. The country house club began to grow. Once a month, we women would meet, sometimes at my house, sometimes at the ranch. We raised funds to help other widows, organized bazaars, hosted talks. The name started to spread. And soon, what had once been just an idea became a chain of support. There were no leaders, only hands joined in a circle. One afternoon, I received an anonymous letter. Thank you for reminding me that I can still laugh. A woman who thought it was already too late. I cried as I read it. Not from sadness, but from awe, at the quiet power of something simple. Because, in the end, my silent act of rebellion had become a refuge for others. A few months later, the gate opened again. It was Daniel, carrying a paper bag in his hands. Inside was an apple pie. I made it for you, he said. I doubt it, I replied with a smile. Looks like it came straight from the bakery. It did, he admitted. But the gesture counts, right? He stepped inside and looked around. The walls were covered with photos from the club. Laughter, trips, hugs, flowers. You look happy, he said. I am. Without us. With myself. He sat down, eyes lowered. The kids ask about you, he murmured. And what do you tell them? That Grandma's famous now. We laughed together. A quiet laugh, but a real one. The kind that belongs to forgiveness. I poured coffee, sealing a sort of peace treaty between us. You know, son, I never wanted you to suffer. I know. I just wanted you to understand what it feels like to be left out of your own story. Daniel took my hand. And now? He asked. Now, I said, you're welcome to watch from a distance. And if I want to come back, the door's open, I answered softly. But whoever walks in, helps keep the fire burning. Autumn had already settled in when we decided to return to the ranch. By then, the Country House Club was official, and this would be our first open gathering, with 20 women registered. The vans began to arrive one by one. Backpacks, laughter, the smell of coffee, bursts of color, in scarves and dresses. The house was alive with movement. I stood by the gate for a few seconds, watching it all. The same gate that had once symbolized rejection now opened wide to welcome those who, too, had once been left outside. Clara was assigning rooms. Irma was hanging paper lanterns. Lydia ran the kitchen, handing out aprons and singing off-key. I looked up at the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered, may this house never again be a place of exclusion, but of reunion. During dinner, all the women sat around the long table. Glasses raised, laughter spilling freely, stories crossing like threads in a quilt. And I thought, maybe paradise isn't a place. Maybe it's a table where no one has to ask for a seat. On the second day, each of us was invited to share a little of our story. The stories came with tears, but also with laughter. Rosa spoke first. My husband left me after 40 years, she said. Silence spread through the room. But I've discovered I still like dancing alone in my living room, she added with a smile. Another woman, Morella, confessed that her children only called when they needed money. I smiled and said, then start charging interest in love. The room burst into laughter. And just like that, the space that once carried old sorrows became a stage for shared healing. Later, one of the women asked me, Martha, what made you start all this? I thought for a moment and answered, loneliness. Did it go away? No, I said, smiling softly. But now, it has company. We laughed. And in that laughter, I understood pain, when shared, loses its weight and gains purpose. The wind blew hard that night. The trees made a sound that reminded me of the distant sea. Inside the house, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. I moved closer to the flames and watched them sway. Lydia brought wine, Clara tuned the guitar, and Irma began to hum softly. The warmth filling the room was more than physical. It was the warmth of souls, a kind of comfort you don't buy, you build. I closed my eyes for a moment. In my mind, flashes of that first trip returned, the silence, the email, the cancellation, and then, like an old photograph dissolving in water, the memory faded into the present. Now there was sound, there was life, there was laughter, and above all, there was belonging. Clara, her voice trembling with emotion, raised her glass. To the women who stopped asking permission to exist, and to the houses that once heard us cry, I added, but now hear us laugh. The glasses clinked, the fire crackled, and for one brief, perfect second time stood still. Weeks later, I was home, writing in the same notebook where I had once poured out my sorrows. Now, the pages were filled with travel plans, names of new members, and ideas to expand the club. I looked out the window. The hydrangeas were blooming again. The breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of calm mornings. I picked up my pen and wrote the final line in the notebook. They said there was no place for me. I found a better one. I closed the notebook, smiled, and went to make coffee. As the kettle began to hiss, the phone rang. It was Daniel. Mom, can I stop by this weekend? You can. And the club ladies, will they be there? They will. Want to meet them? I do. Then come. But bring firewood. Around here, no one shows up empty-handed. We laughed together. And for the first time in a very long time, there was nothing left to explain. Only life to be lived. The imaginary camera pulls back. I open the windows. Sunlight pours in. The aroma of coffee fills the air. And life, at last, is in its rightful place, where love isn't begged for, it's lived. And that's how I finished telling my story. Tell me in the comments, what would your reaction have been? I want to thank this channel Buried by Family for allowing me to share this part of my life with you. This channel needs your support to keep bringing more stories like this one. So click the subscribe button. That way, other women will also be able to share their truths here. On the screen, there's another video you might like, and the icon to subscribe to the channel.